All right, and welcome back to episode 69 of The Bench, powered by Wowhead. And this week, Growl has been grinding Fellowship nonstop, 18 hours a day since Thursday. How are you feeling?
Tired, man, tired. My sleep is so messed up. The problem with grinding a game and playing too much is not only do you do that, but then you eat like crap too. And so then you eat like crap and you sleep like crap, and it just derails your whole life. But you know what? Sometimes you just need your life derailed because it feels good to have, you know what I mean? Like when you wake up. Now, granted, you might be waking up at 5 p.m., but, sometimes you just wake up and you just can't think of anything but logging onto a game, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah. I've seen you guys been playing a crap ton. How many hours are you guys at now right now?
Hold on, let me see. I'm at 56.
So what is this, day 4 of Fellowship, or oh no, I just looked at mine. I'm at 73.
This is day 5. You're
Day
73?
What's 73 divided by 5? That's not that many.
Squishy, you got a math degree?
Like 15 hours a day. He wasn't kidding about wake up, eat, play for Fellowship for 15 hours, go back to sleep.
Yep. It's actually been a lot of fun. And the more I play, this might be interesting, and I don't know if Carl feels the same. The more I play, the less I actually feel like it feels like I'm playing World of Warcraft. I know that a lot of people love to compare the two, but it's one of those things that in World of Warcraft, your objective is to make your character or your account better, where in Fellowship, your main objective is to time the highest content possible. And in World of Warcraft, it's like the way that you make your character or your account better is very subjective. It's, whether or not you want to go farm achievement points, whether or not you want to go farm mounts, whether or not you want to mythic raid, whether or not you want to do mythic plus. And for Fellowship, it's like the goals are very much aligned with one another. And you kind of always have that strong, firm goal in a way that you don't have in World of Warcraft. And it's like, I feel like the more I've been playing it, the less it's felt like WoW in my mind, and the more it's felt like an ARPG.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a blessing and a curse, right? Like, on one hand, there's been so many people who are like, is this the WoW killer? Is this going to replace WoW? And it's just like, no, like, it doesn't have the staying power or the depth without all of the things in WoW. Like, one thing that makes WoW special is it brings together a ton of different people that play the game for a bunch of different reasons.
Yes.
But some of the times you kind of just wish that you could log on and play Mythic Plus and you don't have to worry about leveling a character or setting up a UI or, raid or anything like that, And so I think it's like an interesting thought experiment. I know this is like the 3rd episode that we're probably going to talk a decent amount about Fellowship, and to people who aren't playing it, it's probably a little annoying. But I think it's a very, very cool thought experiment and like way to reflect on Mythic Plus as to like, what things are good for Mythic Plus, what things are bad, like what things exist only because of other parts of the game. It's just like, I mean, that's what hooked me to WoW in the first place. Is there is nothing like Mythic Plus anywhere. Even though there are very, very good competitive MMOs and RPGs and raids and stuff, like you can't get that really close, tight knit dungeon experience gameplay that you can get with WoW anywhere else. Literally any other game. So it's like the first time that we've been able to actually compare it to something.
Yeah, so let's start with some interesting comparisons. So we did a playtest with Hamish back in, I think it was maybe like even May, maybe before that, something like that. And we were able to playtest it, and he posted something interesting in the Fellowship Discord where he posted the role breakdowns of players that were trying to queue in the solo queue endeavor. Squishy, you had some thoughts about this, the role imbalance here. Why don't you take your first crack at this?
So I think we talked about it a week or two ago where like we were talking about beta, like, oh, there's a lot of people just testing out tanks, seeing how they feel and stuff like that. And I had the speculation that the second that the game would launch, the flood of DPS would come in. And the flood of DPS did indeed come in. And it looks kind of, I would say probably what a WoW breakdown would look like. Would you agree with that?
I think that there are actually more DPS and less tanks in WoW, surprisingly enough, because well, WoW does this thing where there's 3 DPS, right, per dungeon.
Oh.
And Fellowship only has 2, so I think that they're almost by virtue of that has to be more DPS in WoW.
So you think the ratio is more off, essentially?
In World of
Like,
Warcraft, yes, I think so.
Okay.
I would believe that the ratio is more fucked in WoW. Yeah, which is crazy because you look at these ratios, and you're like, oh wow, that's bad. You look at Contender here, and it's seriously just a huge problem because it's a bottleneck. What this creates is a bottleneck where groups don't get formed because there's so few tanks. Or rather, whenever these screenshots are taken, every single tank who queues up is immediately into a group. So of course they're not waiting in queue. They're immediately filled into a group. So the only people who are actually waiting are the DPS and the healers.
How long are DPS queues? Like,
it really depends. So I did a double DPS queue at the highest level in Paragon, and a double DPS queue took us 35 minutes. I did a solo
high rank.
But that is a high rank. I did a solo DPS queue also at the top of Paragon, and that took, I think, probably 12 minutes. So it's a pretty long time. Growl might have more insight as to some of the lower ranks because you played like Rhyme and stuff like that at some of the lower levels, right?
Yeah, I've actually been a little bit of a solo queue demon just because I don't know, like it's just fun and I've just been queuing and kind of. So I've been playing mostly healer, but I played a little bit of DPS. Queue times at high ranks vary a lot. I mean, it's a lot like Mythic Plus, right, where your selection is very limited, and if you get lucky and there's the right people online, like you can slide into group after group, or there's some times where you might sit there for an hour and like get terrible runs. But yeah, I don't know exactly how these statistics work, like if this was like number of people in the queue or like over a certain amount of period, but clearly like okay, there's not 6 tanks in all of the first rank, but it's it shows that there's way fewer tanks than there are other roles. And I don't really know if there's a good fix to that, but I hope that this helps people visualize like this is something that we constantly harp on, and also we don't really give very good feedback, right? Because like I don't really have a good answer as to how do you make more tanks in World of Warcraft, but just to show. And another thing that's about these queues is interesting is that there's no LFG menu, right? Like you can queue as 4 if you want to, but there's no like list your name and say what you're looking for or try and put together a team.
Yeah.
If you're trying to play, you either queue up with 4 friends or you use the queue. And so I think it would get even worse in WoW, right? Because in WoW, they wouldn't remove LFG. There would be solo queue and LFG, so the queues would get split even more.
I'm interested in your guys' thoughts on this, but I think that this is like an issue whenever you talk about like tank scarcity. I think it is very strongly an issue that's correlated with leadership, right? Tank is viewed as the role that has to be a leader in a group, and like it or not, just human nature is to not be a leader. Most people, they don't want to be self-employed. Most people, they don't want to be a boss. They cap out at middle management. They're okay with just being like a middling level employee. They go home, they live their best life, and they are okay with doing that. Whereas tank is like the equivalent of, you want to be an executive, you want to be self-employed, that kind of thing. You want to be a leader, right? Because tank requires, herding these sheep of DPS and healer around the dungeon. And there is a lot of control that a tank has in a dungeon. But also, I think that most people just don't want that stress of the leadership element of it. And, I think that actually puts a lot of people off whenever they think of what is a tank as a role.
I honestly think it's an unsolvable problem.
Yes.
The only way to solve the problem is to delete the Trinity. And that is a completely different game.
So they could delete tank. I think that deleting tank actually could be kind of an interesting thought process where you remove mobs meleeing in general, and then you have a healer in 3 DPS or a healer in 2 DPS or something like that, and that is your group.
That's not even what I'm talking about. I think if you delete tank, you delete healer too. I think you can probably do something like convert those 2 roles into a support role.
Okay.
Like an AUG evoker like thing or a bard in Final Fantasy, but that is the furthest into like support that they go. But they're essentially just considered another DPS.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's dramatically changed.
That is very different. Yes.
Right.
But
yeah.
It was just very much a like. I don't think there's any solving this. Any game with a Trinity, there is going to be, a lack of tanks because people. I've seen a bunch of tweets and stuff like that of people saying tanking is more fun in this game. Blizzard, take note. But even though tanking is more fun, there's all the added stuff that happens that still pushes them off the roll.
People don't want to play tank. I think that's the core of it. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, what I was just going to say is that I think one of the big problems with tank that I think could be solvable is I feel like tank has a level of knowledge that's sort of required. Like, for example, let's say I bring in my roommate who's never played World of Warcraft before, never played Mythic Plus, but like plays games, right? I could tell him to like get on a hunter or a frost mage, and like I think he would genuinely learn, and he would like,
Yeah.
the first couple dungeons might be a little bit painful, but he would catch on. But like now imagine that as him tanking, right? If you've never played it, right, like you'd have to like point out, okay, pull this pack, okay, pull this pack, okay, walk here. It's just hard for someone who's brand new to the game to get into tank. So like when I first started World of Warcraft, kind of a funny story, I wanted to play tank. Like my plan was to play tank because I don't know, I just like the yellow people on the internet, and that's what I envisioned as a tank in my head. But I'm not going to play tank as my first character, right? So I started as a healer. And then I kind of just always played healer, and I never got around to switching to tank, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
I think that happens to a lot of people where you've invested a lot of time in getting good at / gearing a character that's not a tank, and then you're like, all right, well, I guess I'm not tanking anymore, right? Whereas like I if only I don't know. Yeah, I don't really know, because at the same time, like any sort of tutorials or like, single player thing, I don't think would be very fun or interesting or good for, you know what I mean? I don't know. But I do think there's something there with like how to onboard people as tanks. And I'm very interested to see what Fellowship does, because here's the thing about WoW is it's such a big machine that they can't, like, they have to be safe. But I think Fellowship can do weird stuff and experiment, right? And so like they recognize that their big advantage is having a solo queue Mythic Plus, and if they can get the tank problem fixed and somehow onboard people to play tank, then a lot of people are going to enjoy that game a lot more.
They can more aggressively make changes, but I think that the thing that you were describing, where you're like, well, if you're playing with a buddy, are you going to tell him to play a tank, or are you going to tell him to play a DPS? And you're always going to tell him to play a DPS. I think that that is part of that leadership element, right? Where you need somebody who's very strong-willed and is like very knows what's going on. And I think that that's like something that most people would just rather kind of coast, which is like, for better or worse, it's just how most people would prefer to play a video game. They don't want to set up the time. They also, people get also paralyzed a lot. At least this is with Mythic Plus. This is less true with Fellowship, but this is more true with Mythic Plus. They get paralyzed by the route and the concept of playing a bad route. Realistically, I'm going to be honest, people way overthink their routes. Like you can hold W and you're mostly fine. Like if you like make a huge mistake with the route, it's not even that big of a deal most of the time. And even if you do make a big mistake with the route, you'll figure it out with time. And it's not something that you have to like really pre-plan a bunch of routes, but everybody has in their head that you need to actually go through and pre-plan your route, which I don't believe that that's true, but I believe that people think that they need to.
I would love to see improvements on a bunch of fronts to make things easier for tanks. The first one, like you mentioned the route. I think like this is a long shot. Again, just like cool things. Imagine like an in-game MDT type thing where you could like choose your route, and then you basically just have like once the key starts, you just have like a GPS or something. It shows you which packs you want to pull, because like
they all like glow and stuff.
Yeah, or like there's a fucking arrow, or the quest marker out in the world that shows you pull this one and this one. Like there's ways to make it easier. Whether or not they like that is a different story.
Yeah,
but that is like one way to reduce the impact of the route, because I'll be honest, for when you're starting off tanking, sometimes you look at this, you're like, this is the perfect route. Was it this pack on the left or this pack on the right / MDT? Like, okay, it's this one. Then you close it. It's just a little like janky. Yeah. So I think there's ways that they can make it reduce the burden.
Now, there is something that I did want to bring up. I tweeted this out, and somebody asked the question, would you say that Fellowship does anything better than WoW's Mythic Plus? It was kind of an interesting question. My response were, I think that bosses in Fellowship are actually much better than bosses in Mythic Plus, and the shorter dungeons are really nice. And I think that we've seen that the shorter dungeon sentiment is kind of something that's starting to be a common trend as well, where the...
Starting?
Well, I don't think that people were really got their minds wrapped around, oh, what is a 12-minute dungeon going to feel like? What is a 13-minute dungeon going to feel like? But now that now that some people have seen in Fellowship, they're like, oh, wow, this is kind of nice, huh?
I mean, people have wanted shorter dungeons since 45-minute Halls of Valor back in the day, or 45-minute Arcway, right? Like, people have always wanted, and Blizzard has pushed away from 45s, now it's 30.
Yeah.
30, 35, right? So I personally think there is a big desire to do 15-minute dungeons.
I think that
15 minutes is a lot easier.
It's going to be really hard to appropriately reward 15-minute dungeons, though, in my opinion.
Yeah, I am personally of the opinion that short dungeons are so good for the game in terms of being able to just play and have fun, and it just I just think that that's a very like it's one of the reasons that I think everybody's having so much fun with this game.
Yes.
It's simply just the shorter dungeons. So one interesting, a chatter who likes to rub my takes in my face sometimes made a comment about resilient keys, right? And he said, well, how do you feel about resilient keys in Fellowship? It would probably be a lot more fun if they depleted, right? And I kind of was thinking about it, and I was like, what, would I argue for depletion in Fellowship, right? It was kind of like a silly question, but here's the thing, right? When you're doing a timed speed run thing, right? Whether you're really good or really bad, you kind of want to have a perfect run, right? Like everyone's experienced this phenomenon now that they've added the abandon system where you do the first pull, or you're 1 or 2 pulls into the dungeon, and then it's like, oh, is Resil, let's walk out. And it's like, bro, this queue is so easily timable, right? But it's like the way that people want to play is they want to just start off the thing right, and they want to have a perfect clean run, right? And regardless of what's good or what's bad or what I want, in general, a lot of people want that, right? They want the perfect run. That's part of the reason why they play. And it's like, well, the shorter dungeon really allows for that, right? Like the shorter dungeon, like a 10-minute, a 12-minute dungeon really does allow for like, you're expecting to have no deaths, no wipes. Like if you wipe in a 12-minute dungeon, that's like, you shouldn't be doing that. Like there's one freaking boss, like you just beat the boss and then you better not wipe, right? And so I think that the way people like to play and the runs people like to have fit more along with those shorter dungeons of, just like, well, like any time when you reset in Fellowship and you go again, even though like it just doesn't really feel that bad because it's like, oh, we're only a couple minutes in.
It's
like,
a 10-minute dungeon. Time. Yes.
Right, exactly. I think it's very different when you like talking about consistency in dungeons when you compare a 12-minute dungeon to a 30-minute dungeon.
I have a feeling that Blizzard is never going to do shorter dungeons, though, because they like to tell their stories in the dungeons, right? Like, all of the dungeons have a purpose. Yeah. They tell a story. There are quests leading to them, stuff like that. So
Blizzard loves the formula of 3 and 4 boss dungeons as well, which I think restricts, your dungeons has to be so long unless they were going to cut it down to 1 boss dungeons.
A really funny dorky take is he commented on, well, I love this because it's a fun, bite-sized way to experience the game. You don't have to do a full dungeon. You just load in for 10 minutes and play. And then he's like, well, this is what delves are in WoW. Like, this is like, Blizzard's not going to do this because they have delves. Why would you add a 12-minute dungeon when you can just do a delve? And it's like, I don't know, like, I don't necessarily agree, but it is kind of funny.
I don't agree, but like, I see what you're saying.
I really like the shorter dungeons. I think there needs to be more short form content in WoW.
Yeah.
Like setting aside 30, 35 minutes is a big task for a lot of people, but setting aside 15, way easier.
I think that Fellowship does a really good job of respecting your time. I think that is something that's a very large pro at this game. World of Warcraft, World of Warcraft feels like a game that you play as a hobby. You set aside very specific allocated time to it. We got game night with the boys. We got D&D. We have men's soccer, and I raid on the weekends or something like that, right? You set aside very specific time to World of Warcraft. Where Fellowship, it does a better job of being this game that you jump in, jump out of as you have time, and assuming that you're not stuck in a queue when the servers are going down. But assuming that those things aren't happening, it does a really good job of respecting your time.
I think one of the things that you mentioned, the question of what does it do better than Mythic Plus? I don't know about Mythic Plus specifically, but one thing I think that Fellowship does really well is the difficulty curve. So, for example, in WoW, it definitely feels like, to some extent, they're really scared of failure, right? Like, when you queue up to a heroic dungeon, it is very hard to fail or wipe or whatever. Like they give you these weird like slap on the wrist when you make mistakes in mechanics, but like nothing really kills you, right? And the problem is like there's these random things sprinkled into this content that does kill you, right? So for example, LFR Razagath, right? Like that was just a nightmare because people that do LFR, they're not used to being able to die. Like, and then all of a sudden you have a boss that kills you and everyone just dies. And it's like, you have all these people that are used to doing this content where you just turn your brain off, or like the last boss of Arakara, which funny enough they nerfed, right? Whereas
they needed to nerf it, right? Yeah.
All you literally have to do was go in a puddle before the suck, and at a low key level, you're only doing it twice, maybe 3 times in the whole fight, right? But the thing is, these pass-fail mechanics are so infrequent, and it's kind of funny. That's something that I've almost complained about or disliked in the past, the idea of pass-fail. But what Fellowship does actually is introduces them very, very early. Like you're 5 hours into the game, and it's already willing to kill you and tell you, hey, you need to do this or you messed up or whatever. And it's like, I think that it layers on the thing. It trusts the player to be like, okay, I need to do this, right? And the mechanics are so simple. Oh, there's a soak. You have to stand in it. That's it. That's the whole boss is the one soak. Or like an intermission where it's like the boss like stuns you and sings a song and pulls you off and you have to latch yourself to the middle, right?
Yeah.
And it happens one time in the whole fight. You have to click the thing, right? But that, I'm watching Limit Max and he doesn't know that he has to click on the thing and his chat is typing pee-pee laugh and then he just gets sucked off the boat and then it's like, but it's kind of cool, right? That you're 2 hours and it's sort of like Elden Ring, right? Where it trusts that you're gonna die and you're gonna fail and then it's gonna, you're gonna learn and then you're gonna get better. Where I think that WoW tends to baby people a little bit and then but eventually you have to kill them, right? Like eventually there has to be some difficulty in WoW where it kills you and it's like there's always going to be that pain period. And so introducing it early and at a more basic level, I think is better for players.
What have you guys thought about the class? Oh, sorry, you go first.
I was gonna say that has been my hot take for a while, and people call it, a little
elitist. You're an asshole. You want to gatekeep, right?
Thank you.
I mean, maybe that's what we're saying, but I don't know. I think that like just because somebody is a casual in WoW where they don't play that much or their character doesn't have that much gear doesn't mean they're like a mouth breather, random idiot, right? Like you can challenge people and give people things to do, and then it feels good when you learn them.
When is it acceptable though to implement these things?
I think there's a bunch of factors. The number one thing is how clear is it? If you wipe, you need to know exactly what you did wrong.
Yeah,
and not just like.
Fellowship could do a better job of doing that. I'm gonna be honest.
I think that's like the number, or like somebody has to know what happened. Maybe not you, but the party has to be like, what did we do wrong? Like I think that's a big thing that I think both games sometimes struggle with a little. Like I remember the first time we did the dungeon we had to click the anchor.
Yeah,
and we had no idea you needed to click the anchor. We just got pushed off. We're like, what the fuck do we do here? And then later on, they added like a little like flashing like arrow or something, I think, over the pillar you click during it, just something to indicate that you are supposed to do this, and then you figure it out. And I think that's perfectly fine. There needs to be some level of the best way to teach people to learn is to cause them to fail.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't know that they are failing, they will never try to improve at that mechanic.
To me, Growl, you said level 1. I think it's interesting because I think that some things in World of Warcraft you're allowed to fail at. But I think that some things you don't need to be failing at, and it's kind of like walking that fine line of like where is failure acceptable? Is failure acceptable if somebody is farming 12-year-old content, or is where does failure being acceptable start? Does it start whenever you're entering a delve? Does it start whenever you're doing group content in LFR? Like where does it start? And I think that determining that line is actually kind of important, but I do tend to agree with you, though, that WoW does have a tendency to baby people.
Like, the clear example you brought up is Arakara. That mechanic should have been a one-shot from M0. Straight up, just insta-kill if you miss the mechanic. Because, like you said, you're going to kill it in 2 cycles anyways on a low key. It doesn't matter if somebody dies there. But in order to teach the person, they need to actually do the mechanic rather than not, like, eating the damage. The healer has to heal them. They're then doing 75% reduced damage for however long. they might not even know that they fucked up. But if they die, they're like, okay, I clearly did something wrong. Like, I realistically think Blizzard should and can use the insta-kill flag more. Not like does a massive amount of million damage because then immunities and stuff go through it, but straight up the insta-kill flag.
Yeah.
I agree.
I think it's an interesting thought process.
And to throw the people a bone too, to comment on the idea about showing you what you did wrong, that's definitely something that I do not like about Fellowship. And thinking back to the like, okay, add-ons are going away. Hopefully, the in-game like one thing we take advantage of from details is that the death log, right? You can look at a combat log of all the events that happened to you, and then you can look up what the abilities are, what hit you with what, and you can see what kills you. In Fellowship, there's no death log. It'll tell you the last hit, but that's it. That's definitely something that I think Blizzard needs to do a good job of when they, start removing add-ons, is making sure that you know exactly what things that you got hit by. And, obviously it's on you to like look up what the abilities do, but to die, like sometimes in Fellowship, you'll die and it'll literally say what kills you is environment. And you have no idea what mechanic you failed, what damage instances you took. Did you get hit for 90% of your health and then you took fall damage, or did you fall off a bridge, or you have no idea? And that's something that is like, we've talked about things that we need to stress that are in the WoW UI to make sure that the game is playable by midnight. I'm not saying it's going to be better than the current UI, and I think that good death logs is definitely way up there on my list.
I think that good telegraphing too, they're going to have to really go hard on fixing the telegraphing in the game to make players understand why things are happening, because WoW has a lot of really good third-party tools to be able to. I think that MDT is like obviously a very broken third-party tool, and people love it for the routing functionality. I think one of the best parts of MDT, though, is the ability to be able to right-click on a mob, see the mob information, and read the abilities that the mob has. And I think that WoW needs something like that in its base game. I actually think that Fellowship needs something like that in its base game, too, to be able to actually read tooltips and shit and figure out like what's actually going on. But WoW tooltips suck. I think that they really need to be looking to fix some of their tooltips to make sure that everything is very clear as to what's happening. But also, and this is especially true for Mythic Plus because you have the Dungeon Journal for Raid, but a way to figure out what trash mobs do in Mythic Plus is a huge deal, and I'm 100% on board with what Growl is saying about the death log.
Kind of interesting question to play devil's advocate a little. Is it because you want the abilities on trash because it's an expectation to know everything you go in?
No, it's because it's because they make trash deadly. Like, I think it's genuinely because they make trash hard. Trash is, in most situations in Mythic Plus, harder than bosses, much harder than bosses even. And so you need to actually know what every single trash mob does. And there's a lot of trash mobs that you're like, oh, I thought it did this, but in reality, this mechanic works differently. And I wouldn't have been able to tell prior to being able to read the tooltip. And there's no way of reading the tooltip in game that's easily accessible.
But why is that different from bosses to trash would be my question. Like, because you're essentially saying, I want to be able to look up everything about the trash beforehand, but with bosses, you're like, it's okay to fail. You need, sometimes you need to die to learn the mechanics, but you want to know the trash stuff right away.
There is a dungeon journal for bosses, and for Mythic Plus is the difference.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's just kind of the difference right there for me.
Would that not have the opposite effect of what you're looking for, of increase the burden of knowledge of going into Mythic Plus? You're expected to know even more going to Mythic Plus rather than learning from doing the dungeon itself?
Okay, I think that's a self-inflicted problem, personally. Like,
that is what I wanted to hear.
I see what you're saying. I do believe that is a self-inflicted problem where you're putting those unrealistic expectations on yourself to have all the perfect information. Whenever I do dungeons on the PTR, on the beta or whatever, I'm not reading the fucking dungeon journal. I'm not looking at. Whenever I go do raid testing for bosses, the reason that I'm at the raid testing is actually to learn. And that's why I'm on the PTR. But for most people, I actually don't think that they should log into the PTR, and I actually don't think that they should read the dungeon journal. I think that they should like learn and experience things first time for themselves. But there's this stupid expectation that's put forth by the community onto people that you have to be perfect from day one, and I don't like that. That's kind of this self-inflicted rule.
And that is essentially what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
I guess I see it more as a reference material. Like, if you want to go in the dungeon journal or look up all the things you can.
Yes.
But for the most part, it should be there if you don't understand. Like, if you do a dungeon and then things went wrong and then you're like, what went wrong?
Why
you should
did this
be able
go
to
wrong?
look up, okay, what does this trash mob do? What does this mini boss do? Like, you know, I don't think you necessarily, I mean, again, if you want to, like, that's a whole nother story. Look up all the information beforehand. But I just think it should be there so that when things go wrong, you have an ability to figure it out. Like, that's one of the biggest difficulty hurdles in game design, and like what can separate a very good game from a very stupid game is to create something that's a challenge to the player but feels like it's fair and it's like you can learn from it. Like, I guess I've been kind of on a weird Jeopardy kick lately and looking at trivia stuff, and one thing I found was interesting is the way they explained trivia was a good trivia question. It should almost feel like you should be able to get the answer even though you don't know it, right? Like, you should be able to like steer yourself in the ballpark of what you should know. Like, obviously you can't just guess it from the question, but you should be able to make a good guess at the question. And that's kind of it is with game design too, of when you fail, you should be able to think like, oh, maybe I should have done this. You might be wrong one or two times, but you should be in the neighborhood of like, oh, like there was one mechanic that I did on a dungeon today where the boss goes on the tank and then there's a circle around the tank and it's like, oh, this is a soak. And then we all ran in the circle. Bang, we all fucking die. Entire party full wipes. And then we're like, okay, well, the circle's a bad circle. Now that's not a soak. That's not a soak, right? And it's like, well, okay, like, that's what that circle means. And then it's like, okay, we weren't right the first time, but as soon as we failed it, we just laughed and we're like, okay, that's what that means. Okay.
It's kind of like you're saying, like a good trivia question, whenever you hear the answer, you're like, oh, I should have known that. You're like, okay.
Yep.
I get it now. Last thing that I want to talk about Fellowship before we move on to some random stuff such as, Crest update. Holy shit. Class design in this game. I think that this is something that's actually been kind of interesting, and I think that it's been discussed a decent amount by players who are looking towards Midnight, seeing that specs and classes are getting pruned down, and then they see Fellowship have, 5, 6, 7, 8 button classes that have minimal talents. What are your guys' thoughts on the class design of this game? And do you think that it lacks depth compared to World of Warcraft specs? Like, what are your kind of thoughts just in terms of the class design of Fellowship and how it relates to WoW? Could WoW, prune their specializations to be as simple as Fellowship specs and still feel good? It's also kind of an interesting question.
So, I think this is something that I talked quite a bit about on stream, and I think Squishy will have some opinions on this as well. So when it comes to the UI, what is difficulty and what is depth can change a lot depending on what you have available to you, right? Like, for example, a lot of people are looking at WoW classes thinking they're going to be dramatically simplified, but that's because they're used to the wealth of information that they have, not just in terms of like to help your rotation, but also to help you see what's going on in the dungeon, right? To know, like, okay, for example, like, just as a very small example, right? When I focus a mob in Mythic Plus, I can make it so there's a sound that plays when I need to kick the mob. It comes up in a special huge location to tell me the cast that I need to kick. It filters out other casts that I don't need to kick or look at, and it tells me if my kick is on CD or is available or is going to come up during the cast, right? Whereas in Fellowship, your UI is not good, right? You're playing with the base UI. You literally have to stare at the nameplate of the mob and wait to see the kick. It is a lot harder to do your rotation if there's a kick that your party wipes. If you don't get it, it's a lot harder to do your rotation when you're staring at that kick, right? But when I'm playing Jangby, I can just be doing an entire Mortal Kombat fatality opener with Surge, Touch, Barrage, looking at all this shit because I know it's going to go kick and then have a giant green bar that covers my entire screen, right? And so the difficulty changes, and just because it isn't like complicated or in depth doesn't mean it isn't very, very hard. And so a class can be very simple, but the dungeon mechanics can really take you out of your element and challenge you in a way that oh, I'm pressing multi-shot and there's only 2 mobs here, and I'm like completely, even though your
Yeah.
rotation is so freaking basic, it's like, well, I need to kick this mob and it's so important, or like I need to dodge this frontal, and I have, like you might, if you're used to WoW, you might not like that. Like you might think, oh, this is the game, the game getting the upper hand on you or not being fair or whatever. But that's how most games are. They challenge you by, you have to pay attention to what's going on, and not just like you have the game feeding you all of the information about everything in the exact way that you want it to be fed to you. That way you can, do all this crazy shit, but are you really doing it because the game is helping you so much?
Yeah. I mean, I think you nailed it a lot there. Like, for people, it's changing what skill is, and this is essentially what WoW is turning into, right? You're going to have to do things with your own eyeballs now.
Mm-hmm.
Which rather than hearing or other things, the game telling you when to do things, they want that decision making to come down to you. But I think the part that we are missing specifically from the WoW side is, how much is that going to matter? Are they reducing the number of bolters? Are they reducing the number of massive kicks? Like, what is the landscape of things that are important going to be? Because we haven't seen anything above a normal dungeon yet, if I recall correctly.
That's correct. Yeah.
So, like, we don't have the answers to that. And even questions like, nameplates, you're essentially playing, with the base UI here. These nameplates are pretty functional on Fellowship. Are they like WoW's customizable? No, absolutely fucking not. It's lacking a lot of features.
They're kind of ugly, but like they work.
They work. And I think there are very, very valid complaints from people about like WoW's current nameplates, including, them moving all over the goddamn screen, and the first name of mobs, always being the same.
And they're ugly.
So, but like, I think the thing that has been unsaid by Blizzard is that they want people to be on an even playing ground, and they want people to make the decisions themselves rather than being told to by add-ons. And they have never said that. That was never part of their stated design goals. But I think that's the way that things are going right now. They want you to decide whether or not to kick, not hear kick and then you just press the button.
Yeah.
Well, so
one of my favorite things about World of Warcraft is the amount of depth that individual classes have. And the more I've played Fellowship, I actually feel like the depth in Fellowship's classes, the hardest Fellowship class is probably way, way, way easier than the easiest World of Warcraft specialization. And that's due to the fact that WoW classes have 30 talents in your spec tree that 15 of them, you've just decided that they don't matter. They matter. The robot takes into account whenever you're simming your character, but you've determined that it doesn't matter because tracking it and figuring out what to do with all these buffs would be completely not worth the brain power that you spend on it. But one of these things is like World of Warcraft classes, I love the depth, and the depth of the combat and the specs and the classes in WoW creates a lot of replayability for me personally. But having been playing Fellowship a lot more, it's kind of proven to me that you could have something be a little bit more simple than where we're currently slated to be with WoW specs in War Within. And it can move to be slightly easier, but still fun and engaging and have that level of depth and replayability. Because Fellowship specs, I feel like I'm learning and continuing to get better each and every single day that I'm logging in, and just, perfecting and mastering your rotation is just part of it. And it eventually just comes with time. And Hopeful will make a tweet saying that you could learn Fire Mage in 5 minutes after hitting a dummy. That's just a lie. That's not how World of Warcraft works. You don't sit there and hit a target dummy for 5 minutes and then become a professional World of Warcraft player. The same way you don't sit there and hit a dummy for 5 minutes and become a professional Fellowship player who's 10,000 score or whatever.
Yeah, I think the thing that like Graal mentioned earlier, it's like, what do people actually need as part of their UI?
Yeah, sure.
Do you really need, this massive kick weak aura? No, you don't. Would it be nice to have? Does it make you play better? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it actually is not needed, as Fellowship clearly proves, and as a bunch of people on WoW also prove, you don't need that. But it makes you play better.
Okay, let's pivot this into some more WoW-centric talk now. You said that, like, what do people need? And something that Blizzard added 5 days ago was pandemic dot assistance and dot tracking as a part of the cooldown manager. Now, this isn't currently working with all specializations. I logged in and checked Druid. It did not work at all for Druid's dots, but I saw screenshots of it working for, like, Assassination Rogue and stuff like that. So dots and pandemic dot tracking are things that Blizzard are looking to currently add. I think that this is overall just a huge W. I was kind of annoyed about pandemic dot tracking, you know, a couple of episodes ago. So to see that Blizzard was like, you know what? You guys are right. You do need this. And I'm like, thank God. Thank you for adding this into the game. Now that kind of adds the question, what else would you add whenever you were starting to look at things on the UI front? I think that some of the most common things that I've been seeing are, you know, a better accessible resource bar, buff and debuff tracking, blacklist and whitelisting of buffs and debuffs on party frames. I think that those are some of the most commonly requested items. You guys feel super strongly about any of these?
Yeah, so I got some flack that episode for like hating on your take or interrupting you, and I think I didn't I didn't word what I thought the right way. And I think that this is just something that like we don't really know exactly what Blizzard has planned. And if anything, this for people who are like worried about you know the add-ons or the UI, this is a pretty big W, right? Because if you remember, I sort of had the take that okay, they'll probably improve dot tracking on the cooldown tracker, but like, does it really need a pandemic refresh thing or whatever? Like that is, and Blizzard says yes, right? They say, hey, we don't really mind these certain things that are helping out your rotation or reminders or whatever, right? Like we understand that you guys are used to these, and for some classes, these are really important. And while I still think that the UI won't be great when it comes out, I mean, this is a huge W for people who are worried about the game not giving you the information it needs, right? Like a lot of people are worried about the party frames or the nameplates, for example. But if Blizzard is willing to, I don't want to say cave, but make improvements in this direction, then surely, hopefully, at some point, we'll see improvements to other parts of the UI, right? Like this is, I think, a very good sign. I think this is a very good sign, the fact that they have addressed this issue.
Yeah, so the other thing that they did this week was they added sounds. So it's important to note that there are no custom sounds. You can only pick one of 67 sounds or text to speech. And the text to speech has to be exactly the name of the ability. There is no option to say like soak or, you know, like kick or that kind of thing. It will say specifically hover, deep breath, you know, like that kind of stuff. So
In the earth and elements.
So sorry, just to clarify. So when it comes off cooldown,
so there's a couple triggers. So you can see at the top there, the four options are available, pandemic, on cooldown, or charge gained. So you can set it kind of a little bit like weak auras or tell me when, that when this thing happens, like if hover gains a charge, boom, you can make it say hover or whatever. So there's plenty of different options there. I'll be honest, a lot of the sounds are a little longer than I'd like, so I'm not sure that I use all of them. But the main one that I think a lot of people use is the fucking air horn. And the air horn's back.
I mean, come on. They're putting the air horn in. They have the pandemic refresh glows. Like, I think these are very good signs if you're worried about the UI. Like, the fact that they're willing to accommodate players to this. Like, what other game puts air horns in the game? Can you guys name a single game that like puts air horns or allows you to put air horns in the game?
Is it a hot take that I wish they, instead of putting air horns and stuff like that into the game, I actually wish that they'd improve boss voice lines. I know that the bosses hit specific voice lines on specific mechanics. I actually wish they would be improved and work in a different manner than they currently work on.
So it's important to note that these sounds right now are not attached to the DBM, the Blizzard DBM and stuff like that.
I know, yeah.
This is only for abilities.
I think that this is... It's a controversy. I don't like this. I don't think that you should actually be able to have like air horns and sounds on your UI, but I think that's just my personal take on it, right? Like that's just my personal opinion.
But like, what do most people use air horn for? Probably standing in some kind of bat,
getting
right?
targeted by an ability and you have to press a defensive.
That is not allowed anymore.
Yeah.
That is not a thing. Right? Like this is specifically when an ability comes up or like happens. Like you can't even say when I get a charge of time spiral, play a sound. That is not a real thing you can do anymore.
I'm moving closer to the stage where I think that sounds in the game should be sacred, where you shouldn't get sounds from UI elements. Like, I think that getting sounds from UI elements is weird.
I think that's
we've had it in WoW for forever, so I know that like everybody's accustomed to it. But I think that if you take a step back and you're like what Growl said, what other game do you have a air horn going off in your ear whenever something is up? Like that, isn't that not kind of weird?
I think that your comment about sounds in the game is very interesting. And someone made the comparison to Overwatch, which is funny because it's also a Blizzard game. One thing that's really, really cool about Overwatch, and I was for a time a solo queue Overwatch degen, and I would be tilted by and potentially tilt my teammates or other people very often in that game. And so I eventually just had more fun playing the game muted with no voice chat or party chat. But the thing about that game is there are a lot of vocal call outs, both that you can do in game and that the game does automatically. And I think that okay, I get that WoW has sounds, quote unquote, for things, but making it a little bit more user friendly or obvious. So examples might be, let's say your healer pops a big CD, right? Tranquility or whatever, right? Hearing, like, knowing that as someone in the party would help, right? Same as, let's say you're a tank and you gain bark skin or like whatever your healer's external is, right? Having a voice line that your healer put an external on you, I think would be very, very, very cool if it just happened. If you could just turn that on in the options of like, or like your tank uses AoE taunt, or, when a DPS pops cooldowns. Like, think about that for a second. Like,
yeah.
We're talking about weak auras and party frames and stuff and like needing a PI weak aura, but like when you play Mercy or whatever in Overwatch, you literally know every single time when your teammates ult, you hear Genji yelling his weeb shit as he's flying in the air, and you know to boost him, right? Like, why doesn't my mage just yell weeb shit when he pops his combustion, and then I know, and then I can PI him, right? Like, I think, and I'm not saying this should always be in the game for everybody, like this should be a toggleable thing, but having callouts for like major cooldowns and defenses maybe, I think would be very, very useful and go a long way in terms of that's almost better. Like, I would almost rather have that than, rare or empowered and then my party frame glowing or whatever, right? Like, to me, that feels way more natural and better, I think, for newer players.
But now we're getting into a point where we're talking about combat of like your ability to be able to engage in a party versus like your own personal UI, right? Those are like almost what Squishy was saying is that those are almost two separate discussions. Yeah.
I think you would have a very hard time removing sounds from this game, mostly on the topic of accessibility. Many people cannot, or would rather an auditory signal. Like, how is it different to hear the word, instead of hot hands versus seeing a hot hands weak aura icon pop up?
I think everybody knows the difference between the two. Like, you set up your UI, and looking at the UI HUD is very different than somebody coming in your ear and you self-select this button and being like, hot hands available, right? Like, I think it's very clear what the difference between those two are.
I don't disagree with you. I just don't think they would ever remove it for accessibility purposes.
I don't think they're removing it. I'm just saying that, like, in my personal opinion, this is just my personal take, I think that the game would have been better off if sounds were not such a core part of, like, external sounds, like weird external sounds like air horn, were not very popular.
That I don't disagree with.
Yeah, like, I don't think it's like they should remove this. It's more just like
the random chimes and stuff like that is what you're talking about.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
I'm just like, I don't know. It just doesn't feel like it belongs in the game. It always feels like it's some outside source. And it's kind of the same as the TTS. It feels like it's not coming from the game. And I think that that's the part where I'm just like, I don't love this. And I wish that they would like retool their bosses to be more vocal about like what's happening. It's just like, imagine if Domitius goes, and you all shall perish, and everybody presses their defensive. And you just like, everybody kind of knows to press their defensive, right? And it's like, okay.
For what it's worth, bosses do that. Each boss
a lot of raid bosses do that. Yeah.
I think you're missing that one.
But a lot of bosses are very chatty in a way that it doesn't really correlate to like what you're supposed to be actively doing. And I think that that's what kind of the differentiator that I'm making here, right? Dimensius, yeah, he spams voice lines all the time. And he's like, oh yeah, he's telling me that he's about to knock me back, right? As he puts this big tank circle on my tank, and I'm about to get knocked back. That's fine. But I don't think that they don't really correlate to like what you're supposed to be doing as an individual in the game. That's kind of my point. But like,
yeah,
nothing's changing. I don't believe that anything's changing with this. So
Dimensius is a hard example because
I agree.
I think a lot of the things that are very useful, like it's just such a hard fight that I don't even know if Blizzard has all of the strats down and knows exactly what people are going to want or whatever. So like one example, right, is when the boss does his like left hand or right hand thing on the platform 2 or the second phase or whatever. For me, having a sound cue to know when that cast starts so I know when I can move, because we're always baiting it on one side, right? But as a mage, I need to blink over and like get out of the puddles or whatever because I'm soaking the orbs.
Yes.
And so having a voice cue of that would be really good, right? But like, how would Blizzard ever know to put a voice cue on that ability? Because me specifically as a mage, I'm soaking the orb and then I need to blink or whatever. Like unless they somehow foresaw that as a strat, like I don't know. I think that it's very hard when there's just like a giant wave of all these complicated mechanics and moments in a boss fight. Like I bet if you did normal Dimensius and then you turn on sound or like you listen to the audio, it's probably pretty helpful. But then in Mythic or whatever, it's like, I don't know, it's just way too complicated.
Mm-hmm.
So interestingly, there are audio cues. He does say a voice line when he starts his cast. I'm like 90% sure. I do think Dimensius is one of the worst bosses to talk about voice lines for, though, because his voice lines take like 5 seconds for him to fucking grumble through the entire statement. But I think Dimensius is the exception. Every ability usually has a voice line attached to it. You just have to actually listen for it. Dimensius also has this added thing of the music plays at very specific times and is locked to specific timings.
God, game music. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about game music specifically. I think that voice lines
is very rare, and it only works on Dimensius because the phase transitions trigger the music start, and the phase transitions always happen the same duration apart. So that is a very specific thing for Dimensius. But voice line, like Dimensius says something when he starts throwing the rock, and you're good to move.
Yeah,
it's usually just overshadowed by that bang of the fucking bigwigs going off, telling you that he's casting it. So. Take it as you will.
I think that things are starting to move in the right direction in terms of the UI front. I think right now, like the only thing that I'm looking at for the WoW UI is like they need to make sure that it is pretty good for launch. And I think that as players dooming and getting upset about it, that's not going to solve anything. The only thing you can realistically do is give feedback. I understand, it makes sense to be an optimist. It makes sense to be a pessimist. People are going to have their thoughts because ultimately most people just want the game to be better. But any bandwidth you spend dooming and being like, oh, this is going to suck, is just bandwidth that's completely wasted. And if you truly think that you're not going to have fun, and it might come off as a little bit mean, but you can genuinely quit the game. Like, I think it's one of those things that like, I'm being serious. Like, so many people I actually think are kind of like, addicted to the game and not really willing to admit it, and they just spend so much time dooming and complaining about what they want World of Warcraft to be instead of like honestly just having fun about what World of Warcraft is. And I think that I understand that I'm not optimistic about these changes. I am optimistic about these changes. Like there's those kind of people, and I think that those are the people that I'm not necessarily speaking to. But anybody who's like, oh, the game it sucks, it's going to continue to suck, and they're removing a bunch of my fun, I'm not going to have any fun playing this game. Like I genuinely, you can reconsider whether or not you actually maintain your sub and continue to play the game, because I think that that's not a super healthy way of approaching a game. Because I think that most people, you should just really focus on whether or not you're having fun. And I think that should be the most important thing, because I think that so many people are getting caught in this like dooming mentality, I would say, where you're no longer having fun and you're not really willing to like acknowledge that.
Yeah. I think the way things are going, Blizzard is not pulling back on this. Like, we've seen what is coming for add-ons in the next couple like alpha builds, and they're not backing down on the main changes.
Yeah.
I actually think the UI is almost serviceable at this point. The biggest offender being nameplates, because those are unusable.
Yeah.
Everything else is pretty usable at this point, and they're going to be loosening even more restrictions in the upcoming builds.
Party
Just
frames
the ones that
whitelist
they want.
blacklist I think would be really nice. Like as a feature, I think that would be really really cool, particularly slated towards healers.
Yeah. But I think
So-
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, to maybe put in a slightly better way than what Tettles said, I think that as a content creator or a podcast or whatever, our job, like part of what we do is like we want you guys to have a good time. Like we want you guys to be optimistic, right? And I see comments like, Blizzard UI is gonna be dog shit, and like you guys are Blizzard shills, but like it just isn't really that productive to doom about it. You know what I'm saying? Like I think that's what Tettles is saying here is like what do we really gain by going into midnight and just dooming about the UI and saying that it's gonna be dog shit, right? Like,
Yeah.
do you guys all really think that if we just get angry and post it up in the comments that they're just gonna drop it or whatever? Like, I think almost certainly the midnight UI for the first season or maybe more is going to be a very questionable, and it could potentially, be a setback, and a lot of people might not like it, but like let's just be optimistic about it and let's just see what happens, right? Like it's going to be a new expansion. Like I think that I'm not trying to say that anyone's right or wrong, or that like I personally just don't really value the UI and the add-ons that much. I understand a lot of people really love being able to customize everything and tweak everything, and WoW has been that for a long time for a lot of people. But I just, for me personally, I really enjoy or will enjoy not having the stress of having to min-max my UI, right? Like having the UI exist in this way adds this other level of like things that you need to worry about in the game and stops you from just like logging into a character and gaming mentally, like it's the same way that people say, oh, I hate the crest cap, or I hate all this grindy stuff because I feel like I can't play my alts because I need to go do all this stuff before I can even play it. And you want to tell them like, oh, you can just log in your alt and play it anyway and do +4 keys, but realistically, if you care about the game and you care about doing well, then you care about all these things. And removing the need to like have a super optimized UI is like one less thing that I have to worry about as somebody that plays WoW. And even if the UI is worse, which let's be honest, it's gonna be a bunch of really brilliant fucking people making tons of different add-ons for years and years, Blizzard is not going to be able to come anywhere close to that, right? But at the same time, I'm just going to be able to boot up the game and not have to worry about it. I'm just going to be able to play with the dog shit UI that everyone else has, and we're just going to play the game.
And that's my point, right? The UI is undeniably getting worse, right? And there might be some changes to the class pruning about your specialization that you hate, but like, and you might not enjoy it like that, but if those things were so core and integral to whether or not you were having fun in the game, things are not looking great, but like I think that you should kind of get real with that. That was kind of more my point as well. And Growl, you also made this really good tweet about the 7 stages of grief for add-ons.
This was 2 weeks ago. Growl, where do you think people are right now? Where's the community right now?
Depression.
I think somewhere between bargaining and depression. There was a very heavy denial and anger when they came out with the add-on. The shock was there, right? Everyone was like, no way, I can't believe this. Now is like, there's not really as much uproar, but everyone's kind of like, oh, maybe they'll do this, or maybe like, whatever. I mean, Fellowship is out now, so if you're in the depression stage, that's that. I don't know, like, it's a joke, right? Like, there's definitely people who the game is going to be significantly worse. They're going to have a lot less fun, and they're not going to want to play anymore. And, that happens with every expansion, unfortunately. Every expansion, there's going to be changes to the game that some people don't like, and that, they're just it's part of the course, and I'm sorry, but at the same time, it's World of Warcraft, right? Like, whatever.
I think that
it's probably a good thing in the law. I wish I could hate this game.
WoW is a hobby that takes up so much fucking time. Like, if you're not having fun, like, man, you could spend all that time door dashing food for Growl and make a ton of money, I'm sure.
Single-handedly keep you in business.
I think part of it though is a lot of people just literally cannot test the changes right now. I think while parts of it, like the nameplates, are unusable, like the cooldown manager is relatively functional. Is it optimal? No. Is it optimal? Hell no. But is it good enough? Yeah, probably. But what are people to do when they can't even test the content? Because alpha is still very much invite only and very exclusive. What are you gonna do? Like, you're gonna sit there and doom. You have no choice unless you go to Tettle's stream or Growl's stream and like, hey, can you just check out the cooldown manager and like this kind of stuff? But until like whenever the beta starts, I think people will start moving into the testing phase and probably realize that it's mostly okay.
Yeah. I feel like people who play the beta, most of the time whenever you're playing a beta, you don't play with add-ons anyways, right?
Yeah.
Kind of interesting.
I don't know. I just think that no add-ons and not having to worry about any of that stuff is going to feel so refreshing. Like, yeah, you're going to get frustrated or whatever, but it's just nice to be like every other game that you just open up and it's like spend 5 minutes to skim through the options and change some settings and move some stuff around, and then you can play. And it's, you know, that just isn't what it is. Wow, like, it's crazy.
Yeah. Okay, Squishy, tell us about the Crest cap, because we talked about this a little bit last week, how there might be different decision-making, you know, kind of things with the Crest cap next season, depending on whether or not you should upgrade with Rune versus Myth Track crests, what you're going to be doing with that. And now, there's been some, I would say Blizzard posted, there's been some more data mine changes, whether or not it be the Crest upgrade going up by 10, and there's also some track changes. What are the important key takeaways here?
So, honestly, the crest increasing to 100 doesn't really do much, I feel like. That's 10 crests a week. I don't think that's going to make or break the change.
Yeah, sure.
But 100 does mean that you can go from, like, one piece from Veteran 1, or, like, from a 1 of 6 to a 5 of 6, which may be the reason. But I don't know. We still, there's still missing pieces, like how much crafting it's going to cost, like how much gear is going to be dropping, that kind of stuff.
It costs 150 crests to upgrade a piece of gear from a 1 to a 6 now? That seems... Yep. So it takes a week and a half worth of Crest Week budget for one piece of gear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, but realistically, it should be quicker for you to gear up initially, right? Like, it's cheaper for you to go from 1 to 2.
Okay.
And it's the same to go from 1 to 3 as it currently is.
Okay, that's valid. So
like,
you're going to be more incentivized though to farm the highest level of hero track gear out of Mythic Plus though, yeah? Not that you weren't already, but
sure. I think honestly, I think the biggest the biggest thing that is going to trip up a lot of people, and they're going to walk into the balance Discord and be like, "What should I upgrade?" Is if you consider, like, is your weapon at 50 crests more or less than an upgrade than your bracers or a ring at 10 or 20 crests?
Well, you can do both.
You could do both. Okay, your braces and your ring.
Okay, yeah, there we go.
At 20 crests.
I think that's kind of
that's a really interesting question that a lot of people are going to have a lot of trouble figuring out.
It was interesting before because I think for the longest time the common general sentiment was like, yeah, dude, just honestly send your crest. You can't really fuck up your gearing. Like, realistically, oh man, I set myself back
unless
a week.
You go like, unless you do something like really weird, like jewelry first or something. I think that's the only way you massively fuck up.
There was maybe some like big things that you could do that would make mistakes, but like realistically, it was so hard to mess up your gearing if you were paying any attention. And now it seems like this has opened up at least for more quote-unquote mistakes with your gearing. Now, that's not I don't think that that's a problem, but it requires more thinking about the actual ramifications of your actions, which could be okay.
Is that a bad thing, though? Because for the longest time, we've been asking for the order to not be upgrade weapon, then upgrade your possibly your trinkets, then upgrade your helm, your like that kind of stuff.
I actually don't think it is a problem. I do think that it is solved by one simple thing, though, and that's that robot, Raybots.com. That's that robot. He always gives you the facts. No opinions.
I don't know. I just don't think it really matters that much. Like, ultimately, if you don't care that much and you're just kind of playing whatever, then you just send your crests and upgrade whatever you feel like. And if you do care a lot, then you look at the random guy that whatever guy posts on Reddit at the start of the patch, or your guild pins in the announcements channel, or raid bots, and then you just don't even think. So I don't know. I like it's definitely a little more complicated, but at the end of the day, I don't think it really will change that much as to what people do.
I do think that you have to really factor in the point that Squishy made. I think is spot on. Now you're gonna have to you're gonna be more likely to go every slot's upgraded to 1 out of 6. Every slot's upgraded to 2 out of 6. Every slot's upgraded to 3 out of 6 because that's the way that you can get the most item level on a per week basis, especially since it takes 150 crests to upgrade on a per slot basis. It's going to really slow down the end of the season, by the way. It's something that I don't really think about until right now. Getting 5 and 6, especially on some of that myth track here, holy shit, dude, that is like...
Well, it's gonna have 2 repercussions, right? So it's gonna be that, but also, so basically what you're gonna do is you're gonna slowly upgrade everything, but also you're gonna, because you can you can use your rune crests now to save gilded, right? Because you're 5 of 6 and 6 of 6 or whatever.
Oh my god,
will
the
be
vault.
gilded.
The vault
Yeah.
breakpoints too. Holy shit, I didn't even consider
So like
that.
technically, you would just use all of your rune crests instead of like a stepping stone tool to just upgrade random shit. You would use them as fodder on pieces to upgrade them up so that you save gilded crests.
But that would only be for the shitty pieces, right? Because you would... The high value items like the helm, the shoulders, the pants, the weapon... You're going to want to upgrade those almost immediately regardless. So you're going to be willing to spend gilded crests on those.
Yeah,
But
that's the
But
funny
the bracers,
thing, right?
the belts,
Is
the boots, the cloak, those are going to be candidates to be left at 1 out of 6 for a long time, and then upgrade them with carved. Which, holy...
Yeah.
Huh. It's kind of it's a weird thought process. I think there is going to be a solution for it. Most people... probably don't need to worry about it.
There's going to be some Google Doc and a Wowhead article that tells you what to do. Don't worry.
The biggest problem is it's going to be different than everyone. Because before it was really easy. Get a weapon to max. If you have a weapon already, then go to this next one max.
Yeah.
But that is no longer going to be the case, and everybody's going to be different. But I honestly think with this system, the only way that we are going to get actual good feedback off this system is to play it for a season. We won't know how this plays until it happens. Because there are too many conditionals.
Gearing changes are so hard to actually tell what's going to happen until you're in the trenches, it's Tuesday, and you're sitting there looking at your vault, trying to factor in all these combinations of things that you can do, and then you're like, does this gearing system suck, yes or no? And then you're like, only then are you able to actually tell.
Yeah.
How's the damage meter looking? Saw the damage meter released, it was buggy, right?
So it didn't even work. This is just like the first limitation. I mean, personally, I know people are doom and glooming over it. It's a fucking damage meter. It looks like a damage meter. We don't know if it acts like a damage meter, but I assume it will. And I'm sure it'll be fine. Like, I don't know what people want, man.
That's good. Oh,
okay,
God.
like honestly though, like people are going to miss a lot of the the analysis tools that Details provides, right? Like interrupts, dispels, death log, etc. And I think that is very fair.
All right.
It's entirely possible Blizzard adds them, but right now it's a damage meter. It looks like a damage meter.
Let's be honest. The only things people use are HPS and DPS. They'll use a death log to see why they died, and then maybe they'll go to the interrupt tab, but strictly just to flame their teammates.
Dispels as well.
Dispels. Yeah, only when you know the answer already and you just want the data to flame your teammates, then you're gonna go to those tabs. Well, you never. I'm like, okay, he has 9 dispels. He has 7 dispels. Well, I'm gonna. What do you even change based off of any of these other tabs? No, there is some useful shit. I like being able to see damage to certain mobs. Like when there's Big Mama, but you're pulling a bunch of trash into Big Mama, and some of it's important, some of it's not. Who's killing the ads? Who's killing the boss? Right? Like that sort of stuff is useful. It'll be a little annoying not to see. I mean, ultimately, there's still logs.
That might be it, right? We don't even know that.
Right? Like it's not like you need in terms of in the game, in the combat log, while you're playing, most people are completely satisfied just seeing the damage numbers, and then you can just upload a log or use live logs or something to actually you don't need to know the Big Mama damage in the middle of the run that you're in, other than to just talk shit to your team.
Yeah. It's one of those things that everything is going to be available in logs, and the stuff that Growl brought up, that might actually be available in the damage meter. We don't really know.
Yeah. I mean, like, there are other things that people track, like, oh, enemy healing done. Like, we don't need that shit since Sanguine was removed, right? Like,
well, I mean, all that's real. It's you don't need to see it in a run, right? Like you can all this stuff is useful and you may want to know, but you can look at it in a log. You don't need to do it in the middle of a run.
Yeah. In other news, Legion Remix. So everybody was playing 5 tanks, and then Blizzard decided that they were going to fix it. And so they said that we are currently aware of the tank meta and high-level Mythic Plus Keystones, and have some targeted buffs for damage dealing and healer specializations coming with the release of Phase 2 on Tuesday. So I go over and I check Raider.io, and I think that there's going to be a surprising lack of 5 tank groups and 4 tank groups going on. Oh, and I click on Legion Remix, and that's a lot of tanks. Where are all the DPS? Wait, what happened to the group that was pushing 105s? Why is this not on Raider.io anymore?
I believe it's Chinese server.
Ah.
Yeah, I think they got a 113. Actually was they had to cap their artifact to get the maximum amount of verse. And to do that, they split farmed Arcway. So they basically advertised in LFG to get somebody with an Arcway key. They all took a boss, then they met back for the last boss, and then they did the next key.
Oh, I found it.
Sorry. Oh, there it is.
Sorry, I was looking at solo player. Now I found all the tanks, the 5 tank runs.
Yeah.
So this didn't solve anything, right? The issue. What was the issue with the tank meta? It was damage intake by DPS players or something?
Yeah, it's just damage intake. You just need to survive. The timers are like, we complain about the health to damage ratio on live. Remix is like 10 times worse, and you just get globaled. Like, DPS do more damage, but like it doesn't fucking matter because, well, you just can't live. Things hit way too hard.
They're getting 2 million score for this run.
You wish you had 2 million score titles.
No, not really.
That's a big hit.
I'm trying to get 2 million scored fellowship right now. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to see what they do. I mean, maybe you might know by the time you're watching this what they're doing to non-tanks. Because, like, I'll be honest, I don't know what they do. If the problem is survivability, if they buff DPS survivability at the same level of tanks, the DPS are just better, and you won't bring any tanks.
I mean, it's Legion Remix, man. Like, if you want to do 107 keys, then you just play whatever weird shit people play. To think a world where plus 107 keys are balanced is like ridiculous, right? Like, I think that even thinking that the high keys on live balancing them is like kind of a not really realistic expectation, but I hope for it sometimes. If you have an expectation that Legion Remix keys have a balanced meta, like I mean, I see screenshots of people in my stream Discord or whatever doing like whatever you need to do the achievements, like 30s or 40s or whatever, in literally 2 minutes. So, like, you can do anything that you need to accomplish in Legion for transmog or whatever to unlock, you can do those very easily. Having an expectation that plus 113 keys are like, oh, I can't get invited because I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Like, I don't know. It's such a ridiculous topic, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any final things we want to talk about before we move on to Q&A?
Do we talk about Fellowship more? I feel like they would really like that. We can talk about resilient keys.
Yeah, Crowd, do you think Fellowship needs resilient keys?
That was such a funny question, though, in a chatter. It's just like, when you think about it, if they added depletion in Fellowship.
Depletion. All right. First question we got from His7. He says, what are you all bearish and bullish on for Midnight so far based on current alpha information?
What the fuck does that mean?
Bearish is things that are scarce, right? It's like a bear market versus a bull market, yeah?
It's a stock term. Basically, bullish means things you like, bearish means things you don't like.
Yeah.
Context.
Oh, okay.
So I think I'm very bullish on the add-on changes. Personally, I will enjoy the game more not having to worry about them, but I understand that some people won't like them. It's not because I have faith that the new Blizzard UI will be great. I just will be happy to be rid of add-ons. I am bullish about classes being simplified. Again, I think that I don't really care if my class is super complex. If my class is fun to play and the dungeons are fun and all my friends are playing, then it'll be the best expansion.
I'm bearish on the dungeons. Interestingly enough, or I'm bullish on the dungeons.
Okay.
Rather. I'm bullish on the dungeons rather because I actually think that some of these changes that they're making towards the UI and towards classes, hopefully, in my opinion, is going to allow Blizzard to then create dungeons in a way that makes them feel more like you're actually battling against the dungeon as opposed to you're trying to fight against your UI and fight against a bunch of bullshit that's happening. And so, for those reasons, I actually think that I'm pretty bullish on the dungeons as well.
All right. I will say I'm bearish on Apex talents. They just look like boring.
Oh, true.
Yep, that's good cause.
I don't think we needed them. I think they could be struck from the expansion, and the expansion would probably be the same.
I'm a little bearish on profession gearing again, but I think it's for most of the same reasons that I haven't really liked profession gearing in the past. If it stays the exact same, which it seems like it's going to, we haven't had any new information on it. I'm not going to enjoy the profession gearing. I think the embellishment systems have been a mistake. I think that the way that profession gearing currently works, I'm not in love with that. And just kind of how it warps the game, the reward that is gained via what was put into it just feels way out of whack. Like it is so out of line. Not huge on the profession gearing. I don't think that so far we haven't heard anything that's changing. So bearish on that.
You guys took the easy ones. I think I'm gonna say so. I actually asked about this in a previous podcast. I asked about what people thought about the tiered raid release because the more I'm thinking about it, the more I think it won't end well.
Okay.
And by far, one of the biggest comments about it that like a lot of people echoed was the lockout situation. The fact that like, okay, well, you can do a later boss in the raid without being locked out. I would be very, very surprised if any of those bosses are puggable or that anyone will be pugging them. I mean, I hope they are, because there's a 6 boss, a 2 boss, and a 1 boss. From what my impression of the 2 boss and the 1 boss, I'd be very, very surprised if anyone is pugging those. You know, like for instance, it would be like what I mean. I guess Fractalus was easy, but most bosses at that level I don't think have the expectation that they should be pugged. It would be cool though if that's the case, but I'm still a little worried about the raid lockout situation of like, or not the raid lockout situation, but the raid separated release thing that like I don't quite know what their goal is, and they haven't really talked about why. Like, it's one thing if they come out with a 2 boss raid in the middle of the I just wish that the original raid was 8 bosses. Like, if the first raid was a normal raid and it felt like those other 2 raids were bonuses, but it feels like they're doing something weird to split up the raid, and I'm not gonna like it, or that people won't like it.
What if the 6 bosses are as hard as like a normal 8 boss raid? Would that satisfy what you're hoping to see?
Yeah, a little bit, but also that would satisfy for me personally because of difficulty. But you know, if you're somebody that's a normal raider or a heroic raider, like I don't know, you might feel shafted by that a little bit because you only have 6 bosses and like they're not going to be that difficult. But yes, if basically like okay, let's say they took this current raid and then they removed Plexus Sentinel and Soulbinder or whatever, then that like it's basically the same raid.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So if that's what they do, then that's fine, I guess. But I don't think that they'll do that. I'm suspicious of their intentions here.
Any other ideas, Squishy? Anything else?
I think that's basically the main stuff right now. Like a lot of stuff's just not testable. Like we don't know if they're doing anything to Mythic Plus. We don't know if they're doing anything to affixes. Like
yeah.
TBD. So yeah.
Okay, next question we got from Topics. He says, I believe that WoW is actually missing an in-game system that is a little grindy. Looking back at past expansions and their in-game systems, we have learned what players like and we don't like. What makes the perfect end-game system?
All right.
Unfortunately, this is different from person to person.
Oh, I typed that.
Yeah, like I had to get it out because you guys took the easy ones for the other question. I think that personally, I don't mind grindy stuff. I had this talk with somebody about like what would make AP good or not good or whatever, and unfortunately, you just can't even come to that agreement, right? Like what do you think? What do you think is a fair amount of damage or HP, like HPS gain for being like grinding?
For being able to grind,
right?
yeah.
Like some people would say 10% or more is fine, and some people would say 1% or 2% is too much. And I think that, unfortunately, just depending on what you want to do and what you want to accomplish in the game, you can't really agree on this one. And they sort of took the easy route by just removing it completely.
Yeah, there is no perfect grind, is what I was going to say, because it's going to be different for everyone. A grind has to have some kind of thing you're grinding for, otherwise the grind is essentially pointless, and a lot of people wouldn't do it. But if there's something worth grinding for, then everybody will feel incentivized to do it, and therefore everybody has a different level of grinding that they can tolerate.
Okay, now you guys are talking about AP. Now let me present to you a different one. What about corruption? Where there was a grind in terms of acquisition of the corruption pieces, and then there was a grind in terms of acquisition of corruption resistance, where you had to go and do horrific visions. How is that one compared to? That was a fixed, you could only have so much realistically corruption resistance. There was a fixed cap on that, but there was also a grind in terms of being able to acquire pieces. What do you guys think about that one?
Very similar. Exactly. The grind is very determined by how long you can tolerate it. Okay. Should the grind be weekly lockout? You'll have people complaining that I want to grind for it now, so I don't need to come back in 4 weeks and get my 4th piece of corruption. Should it be infinite? Then you have people complaining that I need to grind 15 hours a day like Growl in order to get the corruption pieces that I need right now before my very first raid. Like, there is no winning with it. Everybody's going to have a different response. Everybody's going to have a different tolerance of grind. Some people want to grind it instantly, and some people don't. Growl?
Yeah, I think actually a cap on it is one of the worst systems, because then it turns from a grind and a bonus to a chore. I know on paper it's like mostly the same thing, but like thinking about the corruption thing, right? It's like, well, if you grind it and then you're done, I don't know, like I guess the way I see it is like logging in, you want something to do. Like the purpose of a grind or this whole thing is you want to be able to log in at your own convenience, do something that's not necessarily difficult, that you can just chill and make your character stronger or progress in some meaningful way.
Yeah.
Is like the way that I see that the purpose that these systems exist. And so the corruption thing is like a little, I don't know. I just think, yeah, there's no perfect answer, right? Because some people do want that, though. That would be an exact, if you play for exactly 1 month and 2 months in a patch, which let's be honest, a lot of people do, and then that's how long it takes to max out your cape, and you wake up every day and you max out your cape, and then by the time you're maxed out, you're kind of bored and you're done. I mean, that's a good system for those people, right? And then they can come back whenever they want and they're not behind.
The problem with infinite grinds, and I mean, I've experienced this firsthand, is like there becomes like really strong social pressure from your peers to like, kind of conform to what is the socially acceptable amount of grinding, right? Where you show up and somebody's 3 levels higher than you on their weapon, and they do 5% more damage, and you're just like, oh shit, I am. It's like missing renown track levels, right? Like you're missing 2 or 3 renown track levels. Your raid is going to be very upset with you.
All right.
Okay, next question from Oryx. He says, do you think that Blizzard should allow players to choose what keystone they get when doing high keys so that they're able to push the keys that they need for score? So this is completely different from the resilient system, right? Because this would be a deterministic, you can pick what key you could go and do.
So one thing in Mythic Plus, having a keystone allows you to provide some value to other players. If you have a keystone that is a keystone that other people need and they don't have it, you have incentive to get them to play with you and link up. If it's essentially a menu, you are going to be much, much, much less desirable if you are an off meta spec or a role that's you know what I mean? With the current system of the way it works, where you just go into LFG, if you play a class that's not popular, you have no incentive to get people to play with you, right? Because why would someone join your group as a feral druid if that's not a good spec, when they can just make their own group and do the exact same key, right? The reason that they're joining you is to that key, and I think that's why the keystone system exists. In order for that to work, you would essentially have to have like a weird queue system, right? Like Fellowship does, where, you just lock people together and they're forced to play. Because otherwise, if you ask any off meta player, and even some meta players, they can't even stand playing in Mythic Plus without pushing up their own key. But
Yeah. I think for me, it seems like a good idea on paper is something that you want, but I think at the end game, we saw what resilient keys did to the system. And I have a feeling it might do a very similar thing where keys get so hyper optimized because people can choose exactly what they want every single time.
I mean,
Like before you're locked at a certain like rank, but you still have to roll the right key. But if every group is able to pick the exact key that they want at the exact level that they want, IO's going to scale even more at the upper level.
so something that
Now, oh sorry.
oh no, finish your thought. Then I'll
Okay.
jump in.
Now, I think that's the high end. For the like casual 10 to 12 pushers who are going for gear and the casual 3k, I think it'd be a pretty good improvement for farming the pieces of gear that you want. But as Growl said, having the right Keystone map provides value, and that might get you invited to a key that you otherwise wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean it's so weird. It works really well in Fellowship, but I think also part of the reason it works super well in Fellowship is also because like how short the dungeons are, right? There's no depletion, and you can self-select the dungeon. But what happens when it's a 30-minute dungeon? You're like, oh god, right? You're really setting yourself up to be like kind of stuck in there with that group, grinding that 15, that 16, that 17 over and over again until eventually you're able to time that key, and then you get out of there and you never see those people again. I know.
Well, again, you say it works well in Fellowship, but Fellowship, imagine if Fellowship had LFG and not solo queue.
Yes, exactly.
I think that Fellowship's gearing and reward system is structured so differently than World of Warcraft that I think it's
hard to compare.
It's hard to compare, right? Like that's what I'm saying. I think it works well in Fellowship, but it would not work well in WoW because things in Fellowship progressively get easier because you're basically doing a season's worth of gearing simultaneously to pushing keys. And that is like, that's really fun. I actually think that's the most fun. That's one of the reasons that Fellowship is super fun is because that you were doing gearing while simultaneously pushing. And I think that that's something that's actually missing out of World of Warcraft Mythic Plus. I mean, we talked about that a little bit where you're just not incentivized to push at all the first like month or two of the season because you're still in this like gearing mode. Like, why am I even pushing before Turbo Boost comes out? Turbo Boost, holy shit, we didn't even talk about Turbo Boost. Yeah, Turbo Boost is the thing, but you're not even incentivized to push before Turbo Boost. But in Fellowship, you're supposed to do this thing simultaneously, and I think it makes more sense. Where with WoW, it doesn't really work like that.
I think Fellowship is exactly what people want for a Mythic Plus only game, and it is a Mythic Plus only game. But these systems in Fellowship would not translate well to WoW, just because there's other avenues of WoW.
Yeah, I just think it's a matter of you just have to consider the downsides. Obviously, if you could just at any point do whatever key you wanted to do, that does seem convenient. But it's just like it changes the foundation of the way the game is played. Well, it's like, oh, what if you just got a weekly vault that was maxed out every week? You didn't even have to do your 8 keys, right? Like, in theory, it's like, well, weeklies are just a chore, and I've done, like, why am I even doing these? It's pointless. But then, like, that's probably the lifeblood of people doing dungeons. And if no one had to do weeklies, then, like, how it would probably be a lot harder to, like, gear up guys and play the game and do those dungeons because no one's doing weeklies, right? Like, what if changes...
What if you got no gear out of Mythic Plus dungeons, right? Like even more extreme, where you're just like, oh god.
Well, right, exactly. Like it just fundamentally changes too much about the system, and to say like you're changing one piece, one moving part in like a big complex system, and I think that it wouldn't work out as the way that people would think it would.
Think about a while back when the system first started, there were no rerolls, right? Now we get if you time the dungeon, you get a free reroll of a key equal level or less. That didn't used to exist. And think of what that did to the current system. It made a lot of people happy at the lower end because they get to reroll off of Dawnbreaker because they don't want to do their weekly Dawnbreaker because that dungeon is still buggy as fuck, and we're in season 3 of the expansion, by the way. But for the high end, it definitely made it easier to hit the keys that you wanted to, and therefore kind of increase the rated.io experience, or the score. If we go further, even like say 2 rerolls, or the extreme of choose your exact key, that's going to inflate rated.io score even higher.
Yeah.
And is that a good thing or a bad thing? Who knows? But that's probably what's going to happen there.
All right, next question. Adam Landon says, do WoW stats need a shakeup? Verse and Mastery are mostly just flat modifiers to your overall output that if you turned numbers off, they would never feel the difference. Could there be a world where we see stats like CDR rating or a resource rating that makes spells generate more? Resource rating, okay, you're cooking with that. I think that this is like, I think that Blizzard does this thing with stats that they just play stats very safe. Stats are incredibly passive, and I actually tend to agree that stats do need a shakeup, that they should make stats more impactful, where whenever you're stacking a specific stat, it should be visible to you beyond the scope of just looking at a damage meter, right? I think that something that Blizzard went away from because it was too complicated was, stat breakpoints, where there was haste breakpoints and there were crit breakpoints for a lot of specializations back in Warlords of Draenor, Mists of Pandaria Legion, that era. There was a lot of stat breakpoints that you needed to hit, because then it would allow you to be able to, crit every fireball to get heating up procs, or to make sure that you were able to achieve your third Void Torrent during your Surrender to Madness window. Blizzard got rid of those because they were too complicated. And they were too rotationally changing because they determined that the specializations were, too complex because of it. At the same time, I think that as it currently stands, if I stacked versatility, or if I stacked mastery, or if I stacked crit on any individual spec, I actually wouldn't notice a difference. And I actually think that that is a problem. I think that, Blizzard maybe should make your spec or your class feel way different whenever you're stacking a stat beyond haste. Haste, I think, is actually a pretty good stat, all things considered. It gives CDR to some abilities. It makes your cast time reduced. It resource gen, stuff like that. But I would love to see WoW stats get a shakeup. Do I think it'll happen? No, I do not believe that Blizzard is willing to take the steps that are necessary to do a very large shakeup in terms of what stats do to specializations. But I wish they would.
I don't think there's any world that they do, because people don't care. To people, stats are just one of the factors to increase their power, and they're just going to blindly follow whatever the sim takes them as the best stat possible.
Yeah.
I don't think it matters. But there is a world, this isn't an ARPG where there are more interesting stats in my mind, because more interesting stats leads to worse class balance inherently. Blizzard will not be able to balance CDR. Look at Ineffable Truth when that came out, or Vision of Perfection when that was out. There is no balancing CDR. There's no balancing crit damage, because it's going to scale with each class differently. And the further you separate from the very safe stats, the worse class balance is going to be, because there's just a lack of homogenization.
Good take. Yeah, I agree with that.
And people care more than anything else about class balance.
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree. I think that's something that I've always pointed out since I started playing WoW, was how insanely boring the stats are. Compared to literally any other game, I can't think of a game with more boring stats than WoW. But people just take class balance and all that stuff so seriously. I mean, one thing that you guys haven't even discussed, but the idea of weighing defense versus offense, right? What if there was right? You laugh, right? But that's one thing that almost every game with good itemization has, is do you want to be a glass cannon? Would you be willing to give up half of the item stamina to gain, 50% more int? Or what if that's OP? What about 50% stamina for 20% more int, right? At what point do you allow the player to just get one shot by a raid AoE, And it's
yeah.
To me, that stuff is very, very interesting, but it just doesn't really have a place in WoW right now.
The skill ceiling's too high. The skill ceiling's too high to do something interesting with defensive stats, where the best players just take no damage and they would wear full offensive gear because they're so good.
Well, what if you just get one shot? What if you just get one shot by shoot?
Yeah.
What do you mean they did that last expansion?
The Sark Cloak.
Oh, no stamina. Okay,
they literally did last expansion.
Okay, let's talk about the extreme example, like a defense stat.
Okay, they did that in BFA. Azerite armor. Oh wait, Azerite armor? No, sorry, Legion. Legion legendaries.
Okay, except you didn't really actually have the option to ever pick between them. But yes, people.
That's exactly what Grell's saying.
But people over-index into offensive. People will over-index into offensive stats because they're fucking animals.
Well, then let them.
That is exactly what Grell is saying right now. Is given the choice between defense and offense, WoW players always choose offense and the content needs to be tuned around the offensive players. So there's no point in going defensive.
Yeah,
I just think that when it comes to an RPG, it is both interesting and also like it allows you to reflect yourself in the way that you build your character. Just in the same way, like, you know, let's say the way that a tank builds their talents, right? Is you might play with a tank who like wants all the utility to stop everything, or you might play with a tank that wants only fucking damage talents and he does infinite damage and he fucking dies. And like it, but the way people in WoW are is like you almost don't want that, right? Like you just want your tank to shut the hell up and take all of the tanky talents and stop dying so that I can take all the damage talents and I can do all the damage. And it's like, yeah, I don't know. It just doesn't have a place in WoW, unfortunately. Like I think it's very interesting and very cool, but WoW is just way too serious and try hard of a game for that right now.
The funny thing is, it happened once, Grell. Corruption. Corruption was the most RPG WoW has ever been, because so you could go full verse on your gear and you would be like really tanky, and that was required for a lot of high keys, and a lot of people did that. But if you were just doing like your weekly 10s or your far mythic raid, you could just like stack haste and just be a fucking demon casting like super fast, and that was kind of cool. Like,
well, so I think what I didn't like about corruption was the downsides of the corruption were like weird, right? Like it wasn't like, oh, you have less health or you take more damage, but it was like you would randomly get slowed, and it's like everybody beyond. Even if you didn't have that much corruption, you would get randomly slowed. And I didn't like corruption at first, but then when the verse meta started happening, right? And then you could decide, like, all right, well, I'm going to pile verse, and I would literally get made fun of in the Resto Druid Discord because of how inefficient it is for healing and possibly damage to stack verse. But, like, that survivability is extremely valuable, and it's like, a lot of people did that. And yeah, I don't know. I think that part of it was cool, but I didn't like the dumb downsides for corruption of, like, spawning things from beyond, and, like, certain classes could Frost Nova every single one and do nothing, and other classes would get one shot or whatever.
Yeah.
It's weird because this conversation, the only thing that I've recognized out of it, for a game that has so many decisions, whether it be talents, whether it be gear, whether it be stats, whatever it may be, man, everything is so goddamn cookie cutter in this game. Like everything, I feel like you just take a template off Wowhead and you just like follow that template to a T, because that has been determined via the robot to be the best way to actually play any specialization. And you're just like,
I mean, to keep talking about Fellowship to bother everybody, it is kind of interesting because, like, I've made this comment about mop talents versus Dragonflight, and I basically said that I think Dragonflight talents are too complicated, and it sort of pushes people in the direction of just looking up builds and not thinking about it.
Yeah.
But, like, I don't know, maybe this is just, like, streamer bias because I'm a streamer, I see this, but I'm playing Fellowship, and I'm looking at, and the talent choices are not very complicated. Like, it's very straightforward to see what the different talents are doing and what might be better or worse. But people are still just like, can you just open your talent? Can I just look at what you're doing and can I copy it? Can you post an image? And it's just like, dude, like, you're level 4. Like, you have 2 choices.
There's no talent points.
You just, just pick them. But I don't know. I still think that making the choices more understandable helps people make decisions themselves. But maybe it's a streamer thing where I just see. But yeah, I don't know. I think, yeah.
The big thing for me is just you could have homogenization between the classes, but that's boring. Or you could have a difference between classes, but then it's imbalanced. And the WoW players heavily lean towards the former.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think that's a good way of describing it. All right. Last question from Kyle. He says, in the era of hop-on Lee-mix and max any class in a few hours, how frequently do you switch classes for your main, and how do you weigh the fun / playstyle versus meta comp in that decision?
So I think there's like two. Yeah. So I think there's 2 main times when you decide about characters. The first one should be obvious right before a patch. Like you're going into a patch and you have an idea about what character that you want to play and put the most attention into. And then basically you need to be willing to switch at some point. Usually it's about a month or 2 into the season, if that you decide that it's worth it to you, right? And this changes for everybody. Some people will never change. Some people will only change if their class is total dog shit, but they still want to play. Some people will literally change to whatever's meta. And so you having that like window, like 1 to 2 months into the season where you decide to change specs. But other than that, I don't really change or re-roll or gear up other specs very often outside of that, right? Either like I go into the patch, this is my raid main, this is what my guild needs, this is what I want to play. And then a month or two in, I kind of assess that and I think, well, how is my choice? Am I having fun? Do I want to play anything else? Is something else OP? And then I might make that change then.
Yeah. For me, I used multi-class a lot. I don't anymore. I just stick to one character, and I just try my best to multi-class that. Obviously, if you're going for a title, that's not exactly, possible in a lot of the cases, but I just play WoW to clear Mythic Raid at this point, and I have a great time doing it. I'm okay with that. So it just kind of depends on your goals, personally.
Yeah, I mean, for me, how do you weigh the fun/playstyle versus meta comp on that decision? I think all three of us heavily index into the meta comp, where we're all like, okay, the reason that we're re-rolling off of something isn't because we want to play something that's more fun. We want to play something that's more meta, almost universally. There are things that whenever I'm re-rolling personally, there are things that I would consider, whether or not it's a melee or versus a ranged DPS. That's probably one of the biggest, things for me. I heavily prefer ranged DPS. Also, if it's something that I've played in the past, I'll tend to gravitate towards that because whenever I'm re-rolling because I want to. I have aspirations of like either, whenever I re-rolled a melee shaman, we were killing Dimensius. Whenever I've re-rolled in the past, it's for like rank 1 Mythic Plus title pushes. So if there's like a slot that makes sense for me to play on a meta level in the main Mythic Plus composition that I've played before, I'll tend to gravitate towards that. Fun and play style almost matters zero to me. Like it's interesting because a lot of people, that is a thing that matters a ton to them, but how a spec or a class plays weighs very little on me, because to me the most important thing is whether or not I'm getting invited to a group, right? What can I do to continue to improve my chances of getting invited to a group, or how can I help my group be able to time higher keys? And those are kind of the most important things that I'm thinking of whenever I'm considering re-rolling. But
and let's be honest, very rarely, at least for me personally, very rarely is playing a dog shit class fun. Like I always get that question of like, what would you rather play? And it's just like, I don't know how many times, like, especially as a healer, that you're like, oh, this is so fun. All my buttons suck and my team's dying, but man, this rotation is really fun. Like, it's just like, it just doesn't really exist. Oh man, this rotation is so fun. I'm bottom of the meters to this guy who's mouth breathing and slamming his dick all over his keyboard and on every pack, but man, I'm having no, that just, like, I don't know, you just don't have fun if you play a character that sucks. At least I don't personally, so I don't know. I value like how good a class is a lot in terms of how much fun I'm having, generally because I just enjoy WoW in whatever form that I get to play it with my friends and with the dungeons and the raids. And it's like, what sort of in the same way that I say, like, I don't really mind if my UI sucks. I don't really mind if my rotation is like, I don't know, like, I actually think it's kind of fun to have like a really like, I've played Arcade Mage when it was really hard with like, what was it, with the splinters and shit, and like calculating your orb reset chances of when you send Barrage with the 14 conditionals. And I played Arcade Mage now when it's like Giga Simple and you have to track 2 buffs. And I mean, I don't even know if I could have a strong opinion as to one way or the other. Like, I had lots of fun with both versions. Like, I don't know, I just like playing the game. I like doing dungeons and all that, and it doesn't really like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I remember, I don't know. It's just, when I talk to people about this, I feel like we're talking about like two different things, or I'm like an alien, right? Because some people are just so, like, they care a lot about certain rotations or certain class fantasies. And again, I'm not saying they're wrong, or like, it's just like different people have different ways that they value everything about it. Like, one thing I thought was funny about Fellowship or different things, right, is the sounds that characters make, right? So the archer in Fellowship, when it does the rapid fire, to me, and maybe you won't be able to unhear this now that I'm mentioning, it almost sounds like a cheesy like deck shuffle sound from like online poker, like a casino game. And like, I don't know, it's just like very homey to me. Like, I just love that. It's just like a cool sound when you press rapid fire and you just hear the whoosh, 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 whoosh. And it's just like, I don't know. Yeah, it just is cool. And it's like, I don't know, even so much as just the sounds that your character makes, like listening to Fired Up, like do the little snap noise every time his Erebos or whatever does the snap, whatever. And it's just like, yeah, I mean, just little things can make a big difference to some people.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
That was it. That was all that we had for Q&A. We took a little bit of a longer Q&A this week. There wasn't a ton of WoW news, just in general. Hopefully they announce some more stuff with the next alpha wave, or maybe we'll have to go back to talk about resilient keys. Who really knows? But we'll see you guys in the next episode. Goodbye.
Peace.
Bye.